Welcome back to True Crime PhD, where we dig deep into the minds behind the crimes. My name is Trinity, and today we're discussing a few subjects in a criminal analysis on a name that keeps surfacing in the case that haunts Delphi, Indiana, Ron Logan. Let's rewind to February 13th, 2017. Abigail Williams and Liberty German went for a walk on the Monon High Bridge Trail and never returned. The next day, their bodies were discovered near Deer Creek, not far from the bridge. The investigation has been slow, tangled, and at times confusing, with years passing and only one arrest to date. But back then, before any suspects were named, attention fell on someone who lived very close to the crime scene. That someone was Ron Logan. So, who was Ron Logan? Ronald Logan was 77 years old at the time of the murders. He owned the 30-acre property where the bodies of Libby and Abby were found. He was a lifelong resident of the area, known locally for keeping horses and occasionally clashing with law enforcement over minor infractions. Nothing violent, but not exactly squeaky clean either. But here's where it gets interesting. Ron Logan had a criminal history that included multiple driving violations, including driving under the influence. And on the very day the girls went missing, Logan was not supposed to be driving at all. According to court records, Ron Logan violated his probation by driving to Lafayette to dump trash. Logan wasn't supposed to be driving, but his phone data showed him going to a landfill between 11:53 a.m. and 11:58 a.m. He later asked a friend to lie about his alibi. He asked a relative to say they went to an aquarium store in Lafayette together around 2 p.m., returning home around 5 to 5:30 p.m., which did not align with the actual cell phone data. That alone raised red flags. Why lie unless there was something to hide? The FBI got involved quickly. A search warrant was executed on his property, and the affidavit painted a picture of serious suspicion. Phone data placing Logan near the scene, a lack of a solid alibi, and oddly, a preemptive statement Logan made about how the bodies were found, before law enforcement had even released that detail publicly. So let's pause and ask, does that mean Ron Logan was the killer? No, not necessarily. But let's get into the criminal profile in comparison. First, the location. The bodies were found on Logan's land, but not visible from the road. That tells us the perpetrator knew the terrain, whether that was Ron or someone else familiar with the area. It was approximately 1,400 feet from the residence of Ron Logan. Why take the effort into crossing the river, getting wet when it's already cold, and the property is Ron Logan's? It can be perceived as though there was an effort to be on that particular area. This doesn't mean it was Ron Logan, but when you correlate it with other evidence, it implicated him. In addition, the FBI states that's a contributing concern and reason for search warrant. When you later add all of the things we will discuss in addition to the criminal profile, you develop a clear analysis. Okay, so Richie Davis is said to have highlighted that Logan mentioned particulars, such as the physical layout of his property or his movements on the day in question, that closely aligned with evidence later found at the scene. The letters are reported to have drawn attention to aspects such as the geography of Logan's property, including the area near where the victims' bodies were later discovered. The implication, as described by supporters of this theory, is that Logan's own comments indirectly linked him to the physical setting of the crime. The letters by a former cellmate of Ron Logan shortly after the unaliving allegedly emphasized that Logan's narrative about his whereabouts and actions on the day of the crime did not convincingly match other pieces of evidence, suggesting he might have been trying to obscure certain facts. There is a lot to unpack with the letters, which have similarities only the suspect would know. These observations are often interpreted as self-incriminatory, although they remain speculative. However, I'm trying to keep this specific to the facts in the case, so moving along. One important factor that isn't speculative is the cell phone pings that place Ron Logan around the area of the crime scene, 2:09 p.m. Logan's phone pinged near the Freedom Bridge, close to the Monon High Bridge Trail, where the girls were last seen. This was just before the likely time of the murders. Law enforcement obtained records showing that his device communicated with nearby cell towers, at times aligning with key moments of the crime. By triangulating the data from multiple cell towers using timestamps and signal strengths, investigators were able to narrow down the location of his phone with a degree of precision that, in many investigations, can place a person at the scene. 7:56 p.m., a text message was sent from Logan's phone, and cell data indicated the device was likely outside his residence and near the crime scene. 10:16 p.m., Logan received a text, and again, his phone was pinged outside his residence in close proximity to where the bodies were eventually found. Second, the behavior. This was not a dump and run crime. The killer spent time with the victims post mortem, according to unofficial sources. That level of control and calm suggests a sexually motivated offender with organized tendencies. Not typically a 77-year-old man with no history, AAQ, of sexual violence. Beyond physical and digital evidence, a suspect's history and behavior contribute to understanding motive and capability. Ron Logan had prior incidents of violent behavior, which, when taken together with the crime scene evidence, paints a picture of someone with both the means and potential motive. Individuals from Ron Logan's past allege behavior that indicate he was violent in nature. According to the 2017 search warrant affidavit for Ron Logan's property, released publicly in 2022, at least 15 individuals contacted law enforcement to say that the man in the first sketch of the Delphi bridge guy resembled Ron Logan. The individuals referenced Logan's appearance, build, posture, clothing, gait as being similar to the suspect. Richard Allen has yet to be identified as the individual known as Bridge Guy. There is also the headphone jack activity on Libby's phone. During the trial, a forensic expert testified about data retrieved from Libby German's phone. The analysis indicated that the headphone jack was active between 5:45 p.m. and 10:32 p.m. on February 13th, 2017, the day the girls were murdered. This suggests that headphones or another device were plugged into the phone during that time frame. Richard Allen's alibi, confirmed by his wife, stated he was at home, whereas Ron Logan's phone pinged outside during this time. So, why does Ron Logan stand out as the killer? Let's recap our key findings. Direct forensic link. The crime scene's environmental evidence directly ties back to Logan's property. Digital activity. His cell phone data unmistakably places him at the right place and time, matching the timeline of the crime. Credibility of alibi. Inconsistent and unverified statements further isolate him as the only individual whose account fails to withstand rigorous cross-examination. Behavioral and historical patterns. His past, which includes a documented history of violent behavior, meshes disturbingly well with the brutality of the crime scene. In an investigation, when multiple independent threads of evidence converge, they form a compelling narrative. For me, as a professional in the field, this convergence is what decisively tips the scales. The methodology isn't about chasing theories. It's about following a clear, evidence-based trail that, in this case, leads straight to Ron Logan. A systematic approach using both elimination and direct evidence can often reveal the real perpetrator, even when initial suspicions lie elsewhere. Today, by dissecting the Delphi case, we've seen how forensic evidence, from physical traces to digital footprints, can dramatically change the focus of an investigation.